Hello, good morning. Since the people who come are the right people, we are definitely the right people for this morning's session. So I'd like to welcome you all here in the room and other people who are also listening and watching with the online streaming. My name is Henk Kune. And I have prepared a kind of speculation about what the WFSF and other global distributed knowledge networks and such could become in the next years. They are certainly able to become distributed global labs. The question is, are they ready? And of course, the biggest question is always, are they willing? Able, there's no question. And I'll spend a few minutes with introducing what I see as a distributed global lab. The intention was to have a workshop in the morning. Since we don't have that many people and that much time, it might instead become a nice conversation about the possibilities and impossibilities of an organization like the WFSF actually becoming a distributed global lab. So, as we know, we live in a very connected world. And since I'm very influenced by the presentations about art, which have been a kind of red thread through this international conference, I start off with an artwork demonstrating that you can use the flags of more than 150 nations and connect them in a physical, tangible globe. I experienced this in an exhibition in the Netherlands, sitting in a large room with a high ceiling, and it's quite a powerful artifact. You couldn't stop looking at it. But of course, with the connected world, we have a lot of connected challenges. We have the official 17 sustainability goals. Each of them has 15 to 25 separate challenges. Within each of those separate issues, there's a lot to be done. So I propose that what the world needs are much more mission-driven innovation labs. And since the new frontier is collaboration and co-creation in networked knowledge organizations, and there are really a lot of them in the world, I think that these networked knowledge organizations should be. No, not should be. That is the way. Should be? Could be. Better question. Could be taking on some of these, thank you, some of these global challenges. If you have global challenges that don't recognize geographic or even intellectual borders, then it's good to have global labs. So several years ago, a number of colleagues and myself organized a very small but very ambitious global lab for societal innovation. We said, let's have a mission for every year or year and a half. Our first mission had to do with climate resilience and what that means. Out of that, we developed a number of interesting concepts, one of which I'll introduce in a few moments. In 2021 and 22, we said, let's look at what the world should be, could be, and hopefully will be like after COVID-19. And since we wanted to have a positive view of the world and not COVID-23 and COVID-26, we started developing a methodology called positive cartography. And next year, we'll decide on another mission. And obviously, climate resilience is not resolved. No one knows what the world in 2025 will be like after COVID-19. So these are ongoing works in progress. There is a, yes. So here's something I picked up. Caramba. Here's something I picked from the online Washington Post just a short time ago. It was called Breaking News. Global warming is the greatest threat to human health and inaction in Paris. How can this be breaking news? What's going on in the world that this is called breaking news? And I mean, you can read these things, but I mean, if I called you at 3 in the morning and said, what's going on in the world, you could recite the whole thing and talk for hours about it. So something is wrong. And here, this one I wanted to see. We live in a society that's able to land a rover on Mars and steer it, and giving it a name like Perseverance. We all know Perseverance is important, and Ingenuity. How important is that? We can land this, but we can't develop online communication platforms for real immersive communication that are any better than Zoom and Miro and Mural and all the others we've been using for a year and a half. How is such a thing possible? We can develop vaccines to fight a COVID pandemic in a few months because we need to, and provide it free of charge. But so far, there's only one major illness which has been eliminated from the world, smallpox, and I'm told it's also coming back. How can we do that in a few months and have the healthcare situations which we know all around the world? So I think it's time to talk about what a global distributed lab could be, a mission-driven lab, and what's stopping us from starting one tomorrow. Or as I said to someone at a coffee break on Wednesday, she said, well, why not today? Yeah, right. So what are the keys to unlocking knowledge networks for tackling global challenges? Too many people are working in boxes and silos. We've been talking about that since I understood what that meant a long time ago. And unfortunately, organizations are still organized in this way, to keep knowledge in, as opposed to letting knowledge flow between. There's a huge amount of potential in waiting. And how long are we going to wait? So if we are looking at what we could possibly do to create a kind of global lab, we need a generative innovation commons. We need a commons in which new knowledge can be created and spread. We need to break through all kinds of barriers, and to do that we need breakthrough performance environments. I think this is a great place to work. And I was in the Futurium a few days ago, and that was a great place to work. And I've done interesting things on Zoom and Miro. But those are not breakthrough performance environments. We've got to develop through technology and also in the physical co-presence, the face-to-face, physical and digital environments which help us break through barriers. And I said, do we already have the answers as a question mark? I think For a lot of things, we already know what has to happen, and what we don't know always is how it can happen, but through active experimentation, easy enough to do. If we want to exceed expectations, we've got to start both large and small, and we've got to move from ownership to stewardship. A new innovation commons, a new generative innovation commons. What would that mean? I have a lot of ideas. I hope to get your ideas in a few moments. Breakthrough performance environments. A lot of work done in the past on future centers, on living labs, on maker spaces. They're all good, but maybe for the challenges of the next decade, we need more. Do we already have all the answers? Ownership to stewardship? Who's in charge of the ideas, of the innovations? Is there a commons that could take ownership, that could steward good ideas from post-it to prototype to practice? Well, one of the problems is we're working on uncommon ground. After many decades, perhaps many centuries, of working in silos, industry looking for shareholder value, governments looking for citizen value, national governments competing with regional governments, cities competing with each other, countries competing with each other. Where is the ground we know to allow us to work together? Is it there? Can we build it? Can we design on uncommon ground? Well, we did put a rover on Mars, Ingenuity. But are we locked into our old ideas? Are we locked out of the futures we want? Oh, yeah, sorry, but... Yeah. So here are the dossiers, all the information, the knowledge, the expertise. An American colleague of mine says, books, no, actually what he says is PDFs are the places knowledge goes to die. And we all know from several years ago when we started talking about empty libraries, they were full of books but empty of people. So can this type of work be orchestrated? How do we deal with people's concerns about intellectual property and about copyright? Who owns the results? What about intellectual property? Great photo. Intellectual property spelled wrong. But does it matter? If the result works out, you don't have to have all the details right. This is the principle of prototyping and failing forward. But if you want to exceed expectations, you've got to start even with an old typewritten, misspelled idea.
It's not misspelled, it's future spelling.
Future spelling. Next normal spelling. So here we have a favorite image of the young asking the old. This is Greta Thunberg's question to the world. And fortunately, she's asked the question in a loud voice and a voice people don't want to ignore. But the answer we don't have yet. Who is in charge? So I say there is a way out, but to take a way out, we essentially have to take it. And if you want to go faster than possible, if you want to make the unseen seen, if you want to make the impossible possible, if you actually want to get the job done, then you've got to do it. So I just take you for, yeah, going well, a few minutes with a little speculation. I myself am not a futurist, so I'm not using methodologies that that maybe I should be using and I could be using, but I've used future thinking and tried to develop future literacy for the last 30 or more years, taking groups into the future to try to get things done. So let's just skip forward a couple of years. 2022, at Stockholm Plus 50, very important milestone in the development of activities to achieve the SDGs next year in Stockholm, in Nairobi, in Rio de Janeiro, and many places around the world. There's a memorandum of understanding signed with a proactive global lab coming from the WFSF. 3 missions are chosen. By 2025, there's active collaboration with other global labs. Talk about that a bit in a moment. The initial results are already well past prototypes, prototypes improved and moving on to pilots. By 2029, we've shown that in this way of working, we can exceed expectations. We've already been invited to help set the new global goals. And what about mid-century? Not so far away. What about the end of the century? Not so far away. If we want to reach it, time to act. Who could work together with the WFSF? These are network organizations that I'm a member of, and I've talked about this concept to some extent with all of them. And everyone says, yes, it's interesting. It's interesting. Who's going to go first? New Club of Paris, dealing with the intellectual capital of cities and nations. European Network of Living Labs, possible to provide test beds in more than 300 locations in and outside of Europe. A new global urban lab with about 50 members, urban test beds. Open Global Minds, they develop technologies for collaboration, online technologies for curating knowledge. The OECD's Observatory of Public Sector Innovation, taking real-life experience from all over the world, maybe UNESCO. I said choose 3 missions. One of the missions that would really appeal to me, and I think would appeal to many people within the WFSF, is talking about climate change, but not climate change necessarily in the physical world, but the inner climate. This was one of the big insights that came out of my small global lab focused conversations a year and a half ago, that the big obstacles for getting things done are the way we think about how to work together. We're still thinking in zero-sum games, saying we are helping support change, but being very afraid of change, competing instead of cooperating, how decisions get made in multi-stakeholder organizations, knowing what our own best interests are and consciously working against them. There's a lot going on in the inner climate of society and the inner climate of the individual. And I think this is something that needs to change if anything or if everything is going to change in the future. I would think this is something that would appeal to a lot of WFSF members. I think there's a huge amount of knowledge already in the organization and capacity to develop much more. Or, for example, taking SDG 17, partnerships and cooperation, which insiders have whispered to me has a lot of trouble getting off the ground. Who's in charge of the intellectual property, who's ready to spend their corporate budgets or in their NGOs which are understaffed for working together. Could you develop by 2025 chambers of community which work with chambers of commerces, boards of inspiration rather than boards of directors, the real generative commons, which we need but don't yet know how to define? Can we go from GDP to renewal capital funding? How about the famous 7% solution of Sherlock Holmes, although we meant it in a slightly different context? Could 7% of brutto revenues be put into renewal capital funding in the commons? Can IPR be shifted to the commons? Going back to the inner climate, how about storytelling the world, focusing on what young people are hearing, helping them rethink how the world works, what the next generation Netflix could be? We saw examples of it also even during this conference. What type of gaming should be top of the mind as opposed to stealing cars and shooting aliens? Are there planetary learning environments? And what are the learning materials which could inform them and help people around the world to learn? And this is just one little bit of speculation I did, just to get you thinking about what's possible. Okay, what's stopping us? Well, money, money, money. I tell people about this and they say, yeah, who's funding it? Where will the money come from? Never enough time. But we did just hear about future heads, all volunteers. Distractions of the short term. Well, we know many of them. Responsibility. Well, I'm a member of the WFSF, but actually my organization is sponsoring me, so I can't really do anything until they tell me it's okay. Well, yes, this is the old normal. But shouldn't be as simple as a cup of coffee and a croissant together, face to face or online, getting together every day. Future's an open book. But I think we could weave the world together. There are many threads, many colors, ready, willing, and able. Or the other thing I like to say when I'm talking to people who are less engaged in future and innovation as the audience today, first you have to be aware, then you have to care, and then you have to dare. Well, we are all aware. And I think with maybe a few exceptions, everyone in the WFSF is caring. So, do we dare? There's always exceptions. Well, why not? I mean, different strokes for different folks, we used to say. But I think in organization like this one, and some of the others I mentioned, everyone is aware and most people care. But do we dare? So I know that the UNDP Accelerator Lab Network's doing very interesting work in the southern part of the world. They're giving strategic advice, expertise, finances, but it's not yet a global lab. It's a global network which learns from each other. Just before the presentation, Jose was talking to me about the Millennium Project. It's also doing excellent work. It's part of what a global lab leads, but it's also not everything. And I want to stop my talk now with just another piece of art. Also in the Netherlands, I encountered it quite by chance. A Dutch artist made an exhibition called 100,000 Trees and a Threaded Forest. What she did was, over the course of a year, involved more than 1,000 volunteers to come together and embroider a forest. And in fact, they not only made a beautiful embroidery, which you can walk through, a physical space, a mental breakthrough space, but they embroidered 100,000 seeds into it. And in the course of this past year, it's been exhibited indoors in several Dutch museums, but the intention is to set it in an open meadow outside an open-air museum in the Netherlands, and when the weather of the winter destroys the embroidery, the seeds fall to the ground, perhaps seeding new forests. So I like that as a metaphor for the global lab. All it takes is stepping up, ready, willing, and able. So, come and join. Well, that was the frontal part, and we do have at least 35 minutes. We could try to workshop it if you like, but maybe starting off as a conversation. Yeah, Jose.
Wonderful presentation and ideas. And I think that this is important, and we should have even more of this, so I encourage you to continue with this initiative. But my personal view is that we are humans still, and humans have many limitations. Even we are experiencing that in the Millennium Project, because we are a network of networks. And we need artificial intelligence to help us with this because of the limitations humans have. Today, actually, at 4 p.m., we have the meeting of the Millennium Project European nodes. And it is a network, a sub-network in Europe of what the Millennium Project is internationally. I lead the group for Latin America. This afternoon is the group for Europe. We have a group in Asia. But my problem with all of this is we are humans with limitations. So how do we do all these networks, all this work? You talked about money, but I say a bigger problem is time. And that is why I plan to be immortal, because I don't have enough time. I was telling also Tom, I would love to read his books, but I do not have the time. I love science fiction. I love his works, but I do not have the time. So forget about money. The problem is time.
Yeah, well, okay, Jose, let me comment over there. Okay, I think Jose would agree, and I would support the same idea, that there are both various technological enhancements and psychological enhancements that could significantly amplify our capacity to interact in a productive way, more productive way, with the kind of existence we are in. I think that humans need to evolve. He says we're humans, but of course, humans are not a static entity. They are an evolutionary form of existence, and so both.
I'm not a human. I'm transhuman.
Well, wait, hold it. Okay. Yeah, he's a meaning he's going to go beyond, he's going
Yeah.
beyond humanity. But Jose, if you just heard what I said, that's exactly the same thing I just said. I didn't put the word trans on, but we can enhance ourselves. We can't augment ourselves. Jose might know, maybe he doesn't, but if in case he does, is that there's a famous science fiction novel, Accelerando, where the gentleman didn't have enough time. So he created 4 different individual streams of his own consciousness so that he could do more right that way, okay? Anyway, okay,
Anyway.
yeah, but we're not stuck.
Someone else. Yeah, Linda.
I can't begin to supersede these two people with comments. But I mean, the thing about evolution today is it's speeding up all the time, and it's an enormous challenge for humanity, how to deal with exceeding change and to keep up to date. I mean, I try to be big picture thinking in these different areas, but my God, how does anybody keep up with all the change? It's just kind of overwhelming.
That's where you have to enhance yourself.
Well, I mean, I don't know if I'm ready for Elon Musk's neural link implant, yet, but
I am.
you probably are, yes.
So,
You can go ahead and give us a model, and we'll see if it works.
I'll tell you the book review.
But that's the next session. That's the next
But
session.
maybe we should take a little time just to think about how do we, as humans still, what are the creative breakthroughs that might allow us to deal with all this change faster and efficiently and creatively? I guess that's
Well, you're doing, the way you do it is we have to enhance ourselves. There's no way around it. Okay, he brought that up. Inner climate. Our inner climates are not that great. That's one area we can do a lot of enhancement in, our mental health.
But I think I have to say this one thing. I mean, I know all of you are big tech advocates, and so I'm not anti-technology at all. However, I always say this one question. Before we all want to upload ourselves into whatever or enhance ourselves, we should always ask the question, what is it about being a human being that we don't want to lose when we're madly trying to merge with all the technology and the machine? Yeah. No, seriously, there may be some features that AI doesn't have, and you can add to that too maybe, but it's just like, I think we shouldn't totally throw ourselves under the bus as complete incompetence. That I think we have inner intuition, creativity. I happen to be interested in evolution of consciousness, as is Tom.
Tom, let's get some more.
No,
Let's get some more voices.
it's getting really interesting. I mean, that's definitely. Well, I would say that the humans are in transition. Jose, the transhumans in process in many ways. So I think we should take the point of departure on where we are. And in particular, if I, get back to talk about the WFSF.
Yes.
Because that's what the topic is about. I really enjoy your idea about these global labs, for example, because I think we have to organize activities under the umbrella of the Federation in new and different ways. And of course, we can connect on the Millennium Project in a better way because we can make synergy that we can both are, gaining. So win-win situation in many ways, and also that we define some research topic areas that we want to look more into. So, for example, a WFS Global Lab on Transhumanism could be one such thing, or Global Lab on the future of university, or knowledge building process, what was going on in this field, and so on and so forth. I think it's a huge potential to do some very, very interesting things in that direction. And I think we should try to get more into that. And it's a lot of topics. And it's just a question, we can start, not tomorrow, we can start today to do that.
Good idea.
I also think it's a great idea, so I'm definitely behind the idea. I would say, as far as time and money, so getting back to the practical matters, I think there are people with time that might be able to contribute. However, I do think money is an issue, because if you're going to successfully run something, then you need at least one person, probably more than one, dedicated to it. And when most people dedicate that much time to something, they need to be paid. Now, I do think that, there's a lot of intergenerational loss of, unused talent. I have a lot of people that I hear from that feel like they're, out of the market. Well, they're still interested to be involved. They might be volunteers. And that goes across the spectrum from the youngest. We could have, whatever young people contribute, and, an older population contribute that might not need to be paid. They might just want to be involved from the volunteer level. So, I mean, that's just two thoughts, but I do think that to successfully do something like this lab, probably for the World Future Study Federation, we would need some type of a funded position, maybe more than one, but certainly starting with one. So.
Okay.
Yes, we talked about time and we talked about money, but from my point of view, the most crucial point is competition. Is it really possible to overcome competition, and is it good to overcome competition, even because competition is one main part of evolution? So to overcome competition means to overcome evolution, and that's not good, of course. Yeah, so maybe that's the point. Should we play video games in future to compete to each other? So there is something. If we have some some scarce resources, we have to compete.
Thank you. I think there is many subjects on the table. Yeah, so some large picture, like Hank told, I start talking about the challenges, the global challenges, and just about that, just one phrase is the main problem that there's the global warming and so on, but is the inequality in the world is the biggest problem. It's getting worse with the climate change, and everything will get worse with climate change. But inequality is already there. It's already there. Inequality inside of the countries, inside and more countries, between one country and the other country. So inequality is growing. Everyone knows that. And it's not just because of the global warming. The inequality is because of centralization of money and all the and one thing that the Chinese man told me yesterday, I went to China 14 times, but I don't understand China very well because I go for short trips. And that talk about there, it was interesting because he came from inside of them, because I read a lot of things about China, and always it has someone in between. And then they talk about the lack of governance, yeah. And a few days ago, we lost a bit more of global governance, with the government changing in Germany, yeah. So we lost one of perhaps the last person which has real importance in the global politics, yeah? or except of course Xi Jinping, yeah. And so Angela Merkel was stepping down, make a big empty space. Yeah. So we don't have many other people who can manage the global governments. Yeah. At the moment, well, of course, Biden is nice guy, but it's not Obama. Or it's not. He has some other leaders that we had. And the Chinese guy, he mentioned as a breakthrough, like Margaret Thatcher and Ronald Reagan. From their point of view, that was a kind of breakthrough in the West. And we did see that immediately. I wasn't in England, so I saw things changing, but people forgot those things. But okay, so inequality is a big problem, right? And in money, there's a lot of money around. There is, well, I think last time I read, I think that's $8 billion that cannot have to pay interest to be in Japan, in Switzerland, and everyone, they're not paying interest. The banks are charging interest to keep the money. And the money doesn't go anywhere because, why? Many reasons, right? Yeah, one reason is there is no innovation. And, first problem is the lack of money from middle class all over the world, in the United States, for example. So the middle class used to consume, and the middle class is losing earning, yeah? And the poor are also getting poor. So there's no more money or products to sell, not more clients to buy, and now then there's no innovation as well. In consumers' goods, and there's no innovation. Well, cars, they change, and we to just survive. Yeah, and then if you see, like the 2008 crisis, well, most of the startups just broke down, and they are the seeds of a lot of innovation. Yeah? So I think there's money somewhere, and there's a necessary to make a movement to try to get some of this money out of those big pockets. And I think this movement of last 2 months of taxing some big corporations is a way, but it's a lot. It's not enough. But okay, 10% of those is a lot of money. Yeah, okay. Yeah. I have to give it back.
Do you want? Yeah. Yeah, just to get more voices in the stream.
I was going to say transition towns came to my mind while we've been talking, and I don't know how many of you are familiar with the concept of transition towns, but it's a huge organization that spreads these kind of ideas for sustainability around, and actually they start making the changes inside of the town. So I don't know, just I think transition towns is an important thing to think about. And I mean, again, the rewilding movement is taking off, and the half-Earth movement of E.O. Wilson, the biologist, started the half-Earth. And again, it's sort of tied to the transition town. So, I mean, that's a little bit more focused on climate change initiatives. However, those deal with inequality, right? Because most impacted wherever we have impact with climate change, we're going to have more inequality. I also think, I don't know, MIT came to mind as a possible seed money, and also something with like an app, creating an app that more people could be involved. You know how you said that about the coffee meetings in the morning? If we had an app that was like a global lab app, and people could come onto that and communicate, like, well, you could use WhatsApp. You wouldn't have to create your own app, but it might be worth thinking about, because nowadays it's not that difficult to have your own app with no code stuff. So I'll let.
First, Eric.
Jose. Thank you.
Yeah.
There's so many interesting ideas spreading around, and I think I agree very much to what Dana said about time is also money. So if you are going to be a professional, you have to have some allocated money for some core staff, for example, just so simple as that, to drive things through. But when that is said, also what you pinpointed at is that there's, and you also said, there's so much money around, there's so many huge foundations that have very ideal objectives that they want to follow up on. And I think the Federation as a unit could do much better in organizing some process towards those foundations and try to attract some funding of activities. But then we have to create, for example, these kind of global labs or transition towns concepts and all these kind of things. We had to do that, and I think we could succeed very easily. We have done a bit of that already, so we have attracted some funding, and I think that's the way to go in the long run. And I'm very curious about it.
Yeah, first Jose, and then Linda. Yeah.
Yeah, I agree much with what you said, obviously, and we obviously need people to do this. And also there is a lot of money, but not from MIT. I am MIT alumnus, and MIT looks for money. But they do have incredible centers and incredible collaboration. For example, the Center on Collective Intelligence that Tom Malone leads. MIT also created for the first time in history a Center for Artificial Intelligence, and every student at MIT has to take one class on artificial intelligence. This was about 3 years ago, and they got $1 billion just for this artificial intelligence, which I find absolutely fascinating. And going to your point, in fact, there is so much money on this. In fact, if you stay for my talk right after this, you will see all the money that is pouring into immortality. And no one else but Jeff Bezos is putting billions of dollars because finally he has seen that this is real. This is happening. And it could be in his lifetime, and he does not want to die. And he's looking for another wife now that he's divorced. And he wants the wife to be younger, and he himself. So people need to understand that this is real. And obviously there is the problem of money. But I do think there is a lot of money, and the Federation actually has an image, has a history, has a reputation, which should be very useful, to tell you the truth. Very useful, I think. And just one final comment for Hank. Transhumans is a bad word. It's from, actually, Dante Alighieri used it for the first time, but it is related to death. In transhumanism, we actually believe in life, not in death. So transhumans is, Dante Alighieri, he used the word inferno. So we don't use that word, actually, it's horrible word. Oh, we believe in immortality, not in death.
Lost in translation, sorry. Linda.
Well, I mean, one thing you're talking about getting big money first, but maybe it seems to me that sometimes you have to start a project on a small, manageable scale and show that it can work and that you have something to offer, and then you can go to people to get money for a next stage and so on, rather than having no proof of any product. You know what I'm saying? And then wanting money, because I think if we could start with some manageable project to begin with and show that it can work, that might be a good way to then go to other funders. So, and then there's other things like the Millennium Project. Every year has 15 challenges or that they have a report on from input around the world. But what I'm thinking is one of the things, depending on like picking a topic for the first project, one of the things we should do is find out all the organizations out there that already have important information already collected about that topic, rather than doing the same thing again. So that would be another thing to kind of map the resources of whatever topic we pick.
Yeah, just a pinpoint on that, because that's actually, there are a lot of small projects going on among people in this membership. They are there. So the question is how we extract it and how we make it visible in a more coordinated way. I think there's a huge, huge potential. And you're right. I mean, the WFS have a reputation, had a, almost 50 years history. So it can point on a lot of achievement also historically. And that is a very good point of departure. And I'm not necessarily thinking of project funding directly, but also to make cooperate to cooperate with foundations, that we are cooperating to create calls with them that are addressing these kind of topics that we are interested in. I think that is even more interesting. And also I want to mention the accreditation project that we are launching. That's also on the meta level, in the sense that we are creating an infrastructure to how to make future reasoning more eligible among funding institutions, among authorities, among universities, and so on and so forth. So I think it's also infrastructure on the meta level here is very, very important.
Yeah. Yeah.
Just picking up, Jose mentioned that I think that we should improve. Yeah, I finished just before the pandemic. It's a 4-year project with Siemens in Norway, And yeah, you're from Norway? Okay. Yeah, in oil and gas in Norway, Oslo. Yeah, okay. I work with them, so I managed to go there something 4 times. Yeah, it was nice. And but then they discovered me because I have been working with collaboration. So you mentioned about collaboration competition. So collaboration, and since the beginning in Palo Alto, the first work on computer support cooperative work. So I've been working with that thing with highs and downs, yeah. And then collaboration is the opposite of competition, right? And then in the capitalism, yeah, and mostly in the United States, they make their progress through competition inside of the companies. You compete with one company, the other one. Inside of the company, you compete with your colleagues. So there is no space for new ideas. By that time, you need just productivity. The competition is good for productivity. So you compete, and then productivity goes. And then at a certain moment, everyone has reached the same level, and they need new products. So collaboration starts. And then Siemens discovered, because they found this buzzword competition, and then the Gartner group said, okay, competition, one of the 3 important subjects for the next year. And then they found me there because I published lot of things on that and so on. Okay, so collaboration. And then I have doing that, but I have a lot of students, and the students don't want to use WhatsApp anymore. And if email is for them, it's just for some. Email for me is just to send documents anyway. But they came with this new tool called Discord. Yeah, with Discord came from the gaming, and it's very complicated because you can do a lot of things, and then I get lost in the. But it's more powerful than WhatsApp. You have many groups and so on. So the problem is we are getting old. Okay, I am getting old anyway. And then, if you're thinking about using the knowledge and the power of people when they can work for free, perhaps, we need to have tools to improve the capacity, but also have the limitation of not. I try to do a lot of things on the same time, different things. I have many different groups and subjects, but I'm losing that capacity of coordinating those things. And this Discord tool, for me, was emblematic because I said, okay, they use this thing. I always go there and can't you use WhatsApp so simpler? But then it's simpler, but it's not good enough. And with Siemens, we try to make tools there, and what I call meet intelligence, because at that center, they are always doing remote meetings all the time, yeah, and over the world, even before the pandemics, and they lost all that information. Because I had produced tools to prepare the meetings, and I had produced tools to run the meetings, and I had produced tools to do the after meeting, right? Because I came from computer science in my department, it is easy to get students for programming, but it's difficult to get students for the other things. And then, just to finish, what happens? One simple thing, they had a lot of meetings, but they could record the meetings. But they were not recording. I said, why not? Oh, because nobody wants to listen to it afterward, because nobody finds it. So we put a lot of intelligence, a bit of artificial intelligence, but simple things, database, just to get the videos, extraction, the audio and the video, and index those things, yeah, and classify. And then you have agendas, and you could produce automatically the minutes of the meetings, which is very painful to do. And then you can, because if you have a meeting, like, this is not a scene that are happening. But if you come with some knowledge, and then you go out of the meeting, yeah, with the same knowledge, yeah, it's useless. Yeah, and that happens most of the time. So I think we need tools, right? Yeah. And thinking about that, yes, the multidisciplinarity and all stage.
Excellent. Linda?
Okay, I'm just going to be the devil's advocate here for a minute,
yeah.
But I think if we pick a project to start with, okay, but then I think we should try to create a whole wheel of some kind of all the things that lead to innovation. Like, why are people innovative? And not rely only on augmenting our brain, but every other, there's whole kinds of studies of creativity, including in different cultures, different models of creativity. There's also different studies on geniuses, you know, what makes them a genius. And often they had an ability to get in some altered state of consciousness, actually, and tap into some bigger, you know, metaverse of where we're connected in consciousness, and come back with creative ideas that they could then input. And, you know, I just think as human beings we should, and all the technology is fine, I'm not against that, but just to reduce that to only the source of our innovation, I think is missing something. So I'd like us to see a creative wheel of some kind where we look at all the sources of innovation, that we could then start to look at how to tap those for whatever project we choose to focus on.
Could I support her a little bit on this one? Okay, yeah. I would agree that one does not have to turn to technological augmentation in order to enhance our mental capacities. And in fact, there are many ways in which we can enhance our mental capacities simply using our mental capacities, literally. We can evolve our minds through our minds. And Linda brings up creativity and research on creativity. And in fact, there's a lot of research on creativity. There's also research on more positive, empowering emotional states. There's also research on critical thinking and how to enhance that. And these are things that would have a tremendous benefit on the global structure of reality if we were to begin to throw more focus on each of us attempting to become more empowered, conscious, self-aware, motivated, organized minds and personalities.
Creativity, what is the source of our creativity, and how to apply it?
Yeah, and there's lots of research on that. Yeah, there's wheel
or something, and then how to apply it to whatever topic.
But there's many there's many dimensions besides creativity. There's many dimensions to the human mind.
Critical thinking could help.
Or vice versa. Actually, the book's on vice versa. How critical thinking helps creativity.
Yeah. So we have about 10 minutes left. So let me try to wrap it up. I've put a combination of things I heard and things I want to ask in the order that I left the space for. So I like all of these things. So we start small, show it works, there's a proof of concept, then you can, well, this should be here, cooperate with foundations in making calls. You define the challenge. You develop a kind of creative wheel of sources and resources, combining and synthesizing knowledge. And then, what I know from action research, once you've defined your challenge, you feed your thinking with the knowledge that there is and the research that still needs to be done. Because I'm so interested in the inner climate, I listen to lots of YouTube presentations and read papers. There's hundreds of people all over the world writing about it, but can we get them together and then make a synthesis and say, if we have a best guess, it's this, and then do something with it. You develop your hypothesis, the best guess. You prototype it, test it, improve it, iterative process. And then you decide, are we going to go from post-it to prototype to pilot in 9 months or in 18 months? One of my first slides was about exceeding expectations, going faster than anyone thinks is possible. Why not try? Because everything is going slowly these days. We are halfway from 2015 to 2030 when the SDGs should all be realized, and let's say we are lagging behind, I think. But there's still 8 years. And one of the goals should be to involve our minds through our minds. I think this was a nice wrap-up with the big, what did they used to call the big, hairy, ambitious goals? They called it back in the 80s. Yeah, Collins and Porras. So what do we think here? I think most people here are WFSF members, and of course, a lot of the people who may be listening to this online will be WFSF members. There is a strategy session this afternoon. Should Eric take some of this to the strategy session?
That's exactly what I want to propose, because I think in the strategy session that we're aiming at later this afternoon is exactly those kind of discussions as what I'm at least looking for. So if I can use those your notes there as an input to that strategy session, it would be great.
So there's a few moments for parting shots, final comments. I can fill it because I could talk all day about this stuff, about other people. You haven't said anything yet. Would you like to contribute?
Well, I think we need people. At the moment, we are making a really bad use of the internet. For example, when we said many good things about the creativity, the need of having a consciousness of the urgency to resolve many problems. But we can start also by individual. And this is possible also empowering a good information, the best practices, and also institutions and groups and nodes at global level can work to improve the culture, the literacy of how to use the word in a better ways, not only for us, but also for persons who will be after us. And here I think that people have to be present between the words, because we are working for them, but they can also work. Nothing ever is falling from the sky and from somebody who is greater than us. Here there are persons who are more conscious, have more consciousness about problems, but there is also a very bad information, and it can worsen and it can make come the good results later, and we can't much lose our times. I'm not sure that 2050 is a good deadline to resolve the global world, because it is a century when the problem was posed for the first time. Nobody can say, oh, well, in a century we'll reach out. No, I'm not sure. That's it. People. We need also people.
Yes. People at the top, the way to start. Adriana, you would like to? No?
I don't really have a comment.
Okay.
I'm struggling to see what you're doing.
You other comments? Last comments?
I have a comment.
Okay. No, I also, I think it's 2050 is more like a metaphor for long term. So it's not literally to be defined, in my opinion. So yeah. But I just want to comment on what the gentleman down there said earlier about the competition. I understood you referred it to the evolution thinking, but it's also very actual for us in our strategy, because are we going to compete? Are we going to collaborate? How do we sort that out? Because, of course, we're going to compete with a lot of institutions that we maybe not share our values or share our goals or whatever, but we also have to create an environment of collaboration and bridge building. So to balance those things, it's also extremely important. To be a good competitor, you have to also be a great collaborator, I think.
Yeah, in fact, I even comment on what Eric just said here. A part of a more evolved mind would be able to see and integrate collaboration with competition as two important elements in thinking things out. We can have people who are very competitive and don't have much of an ability to cooperate or collaborate, and there is not that balance in their own psyches. So if we identify what would be qualities of a more advanced or evolved human mind, including mental health and cognitive abilities too, one of the ones that we could propose would indeed be a human mind that appreciates the value of competition. You can't get rid of it, but at the same time is able to collaborate as well. Yeah, and I would comment on the World Future Study Federation and previously the World Future Society, that among its members, there were not that many who had a psychological background. They tended to be techie or more collective social. So throwing more of an emphasis into our own individual psychologies and how we could imagine more evolved minds in the future, just like more evolved societies or more evolved technology, that would be a critical thing to add into the stew of futuristic thinking, because I think that would mean a big thing in terms of our futures. Yes, go ahead.
Just one quick thing. We are social beings. Yeah, we're social animals. And all the social animals, are not only the humans, they have one thing in common. It's hardwired inside of our brain, is that we have to care for the others. Because if you don't, more than for us, because if you don't care for the others, there is no society. Since they are apes, since they are the lions or the elephants, they care for the others. That's how the societies go. And then, this book telling very anecdotes, story about that. And once you receive some favor, someone, yeah, this principle is the base of the saving. Is the primitive society. They used to save, they have a lot of food. Okay, give the food, because you know they will give you back when you need. That's hardwired us. And then there's some society that can see that. For example, I did a favor for a guy and find a place for her exceptional kid in a school, right? And for 20 years or 15 years, he was always trying to help me in something. And then, because his son was a pianist, my son needed to buy a keyboard, and he gave me a keyboard, my son, out of nothing. I said, come on, no, I owe you that. Yeah, so and that's something that people, and there's a lot of things like in the floods of United States, in Netherlands, those floods, and people can't help each other because they have to. So that's a basic thing that so he started putting this helping others as a principle. So you don't do only two things together. You try to help.
People and planet. Do a favor for people and planet. I thought of two more things we haven't discussed, and I don't know if we're running out of time, so maybe it's irrelevant. Oh, sorry. I mean, I just thought of two possible things. We would have to have a decision-making process of how we pick the first project, which we haven't discussed at all. And then there may be also issues. I see the world as made up of systems within systems within systems within systems. So we're talking about global cooperation, but that could have input from national levels, local levels, individuals. And we're talking about individuals, how to be more creative. But I think part of our mapping might be, you know, if we put a project in the middle, a name of a project at some point, and then there used to be a group in the United States, actually, this is they had a circular decision-making process, and this was the U.S. Army, actually, but they were futurists, and they would have a retreat for a week, and they would put, like, a goal of a book title in the middle, and then they had a circle around it of all the people in their inner core group and so on, but they had an inner coordinating group, then they had the people around, and then under each name they had the top 3 skills of people. And this is just an idea. And then they had another circle outside organizations that could also be contacted, that would be resources and so on. And those could be national, global, whatever. But I'm just thinking about you know, how we organize input of creativity from all kinds of sources to get the product we want.
Okay, I think some people might want to go get a coffee, so let me wrap it up. Let me just address a few of the things. How are we going to do it? Perhaps for the discussion in the strategy group. How are we going to curate and organize all the insights, sources, and resources? Earlier I mentioned this other network I'm involved with, Open Global Mind. There are more than 200 very tech-savvy people of all ages, and if they buy into this type of idea, I think they can also help create the technologies needed to curate this type of information. Going back to Tom and his comment, I'm happy that the paper layout now started with people and ended with people. I consider, in my own innocent way, futures literacy as a tool for helping evolving minds through minds. So there's already this tool as part of the organization and theme of the conference. So that's a place to build. So maybe we're not starting on uncommon ground, but we're starting on common ground. So thanks for a lively discussion. Thanks everyone who was listening in. Make your voices heard and come join the Distributed Global Lab.
Thank you.